I stood outside the old mansion, clutching the pizza box tightly in my hands. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to steel myself for what lay ahead. I had delivered pizzas to some pretty creepy places before, but this one was different. There was something about the eerie silence that surrounded the house that made me feel like I was being watched. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. After what felt like an eternity, the door slowly creaked open. An old woman stood before me, her eyes sunken and her skin gray and lifeless. She took the pizza from me without saying a word, her long fingers wrapping tightly around the box. As I turned to leave, a strange feeling washed over me. It was like a cold hand gripping my shoulder, urging me to turn back. I ignored it and walked back to my car, but the feeling stayed with me. It wasn't until I was driving away that I realized something was wrong. The road I was on was unfamiliar, and there were no streetlights to guide me. The only illumination came from the eerie glow of the full moon. My heart racing, I pulled over to the side of the road and tried to get my bearings. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growling sound coming from the woods behind me. I froze, my mind racing with fear. I knew I had to get out of there, but my car wouldn't start. The growling grew louder and closer, and I could see glowing eyes in the darkness. I was trapped. I tried to call for help, but my phone was dead. As the creatures closed in, I knew that I was doomed. I had never believed in the supernatural before, but now I was living a horror story come to life. And all because I had delivered a pizza to the wrong house. Just as the creatures were about to pounce, a beam of light shone in the distance. It was a car heading towards me. I felt a glimmer of hope, but it was quickly extinguished as the car screeched to a halt. The driver stepped out of the car, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was the old woman from the mansion. She had changed into a long black robe, and her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "Come with me," she said, beckoning me towards the car. "I'll take you back to the mansion." I knew I should run, but I was paralyzed with fear. As she drove me back to the mansion, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew that I was walking into a trap. Sure enough, when we arrived at the mansion, I was greeted by a group of strange, hooded figures. They led me down into the basement, where I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the room, was a pentagram. And in the middle of the pentagram, was a pizza box. "We've been waiting for you," the old woman said. "We need your blood to complete the ritual." I tried to run, but the hooded figures were too strong. They dragged me to the center of the pentagram and began chanting in a language I didn't understand. I felt a sharp pain in my arm, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was back in my car. It was morning, and the sun was shining. I looked down at my arm, and saw a strange symbol etched into my skin. I knew that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. From that day on, I never delivered pizza to a creepy house again. And I never forgot the horror story that had become my reality. For weeks after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I saw strange symbols etched into the walls of buildings, and every time I saw a hooded figure, my heart skipped a beat. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, but I knew deep down that something was following me. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, and I couldn't leave my house after dark. Then, one night, I heard a knock at my door. I peered through the peephole, and my heart sank. It was the old woman from the mansion. I tried to pretend I wasn't home, but she kept knocking. Finally, I mustered up the courage to open the door. She didn't say a word. Instead, she handed me a piece of paper with an address written on it. It was a pizza order. "I need you to deliver this pizza," she said. "Or else." I knew I had no choice. As I made my way to the address, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. The address led to an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of town. When I arrived, I saw that the building had been boarded up. But there was a hole in the wall, just big enough for me to crawl through. I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and crawled inside. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and I could hear strange noises coming from the darkness. I took a step forward, and my foot hit something solid. It was a pizza box. I opened the box, and inside was a note. "Welcome to the cult," it read. "We've been waiting for you." That's when I saw them. The hooded figures from the basement of the mansion. They surrounded me, their eyes glowing in the darkness. I tried to run, but they were too fast. They dragged me towards the center of the room, where a pentagram had been drawn on the floor. I knew what was about to happen. They were going to sacrifice me to their dark god. I closed my eyes and braced myself for the worst. But then, I heard a voice. It was the old woman from the mansion. She was chanting something in a language I didn't understand, and the hooded figures were bowing down before her. I saw my chance and bolted for the door. I could hear them chasing after me, but I was faster. I burst through the hole in the wall and ran until I couldn't run anymore. When I finally stopped, I was miles away from the building. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. I knew then that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. I had stumbled upon a cult of pizza-worshipping fanatics, and they had wanted to make me their sacrifice. From that day on, I never delivered pizza again. And I never forgot the horror story that had become my reality. But even though I quit my job as a pizza delivery person, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cult was still after me. I saw strange symbols everywhere I went, and I heard whispers in the dark. I started to become paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every little sound. I knew that I had to do something to protect myself. That's when I remembered the symbol that had been etched into my arm after the ritual in the basement. I did some research and discovered that it was a symbol of protection, a ward against evil spirits. I started drawing the symbol everywhere, on my walls, my doors, and even on my skin. It gave me a sense of comfort, knowing that I had some measure of protection. But it wasn't enough. One night, I heard a knock at my door. I cautiously made my way to the door and peered through the peephole. It was the old woman from the mansion again. She was smiling, but there was something sinister in her eyes. "I have a proposition for you," she said. "Join us, and we can offer you protection. We can make sure that you're never in danger again." I knew that I couldn't trust her, but I was desperate. I agreed to meet her at the abandoned building. When I arrived, the hooded figures were waiting for me. They led me to the center of the room, where the old woman was standing. She held out her hand, and I took it. That's when I saw the knife in her other hand. Before I could react, she plunged the knife into my chest. I felt a searing pain and fell to the ground. As I lay there, bleeding out, I heard the cultists chanting around me. I knew that I was going to die. But then, I felt a surge of energy. The symbol on my arm started glowing, and I felt a warmth spread through my body. The cultists recoiled in fear, and the old woman screamed. I felt myself lifted off the ground, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I had survived the attack, but I knew that I would never be the same again. I had been marked by the cult, and they would never stop coming after me. But I was ready for them. I had the symbol of protection, and I would use it to fight back against the darkness. From that day on, I became a hunter of the supernatural. I traveled the world, seeking out evil and vanquishing it. And I never forgot the horror story that had become my reality. After my recovery, I knew that I couldn't stay in that town anymore. The memories of the cult and the old mansion were too much for me to handle. So, I packed up my belongings and left, hoping to start anew. I found a job at another pizza company in a new town. It was a small, family-owned business, and the owners were kind and welcoming. They didn't know about my past, and I didn't tell them. I just wanted to move on and forget. But the past has a way of catching up with you. One night, as I was making a delivery to a remote part of town, I felt that familiar sense of dread creeping up on me. I drove up to a rundown old house, and as I got out of my car, I heard chanting coming from inside. I froze. It couldn't be happening again. Not here. But then, I realized that it was just a coincidence. It was just a group of teenagers playing around with some kind of occult ritual. I took a deep breath and walked up to the door. I knocked, and a boy opened it. He looked surprised to see me. Hi," he said. "We didn't order any pizza." I was about to turn around and leave when I saw something that made me freeze in terror. On the wall behind the boy, there was a symbol, the same symbol that the cult had used to mark me. I knew that I had to get out of there. I turned and ran back to my car, but it wouldn't start. I heard the chanting growing louder, and I knew that they were coming after me. I got out of the car and started running. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I had to get away. As I ran, I felt something grab my ankle. I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands on the pavement. When I looked up, I saw that it was one of the cultists, dressed in a hooded robe. I struggled to get away, but he was too strong. He pulled me towards him, and I saw that he was holding a knife, the same kind of knife that the old woman had used to stab me. I closed my eyes and prepared for the worst, but then I felt a sudden surge of power. The symbol on my arm started glowing, and I felt a warmth spread through my body. The cultist recoiled in fear, and I used the opportunity to break free. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back. When I got back to the pizza place, I was shaking and covered in sweat. The owners could see that something was wrong, and they called the police. The police arrived, but they didn't find anything at the house. It was like the cultists had disappeared into thin air. From that day on, I knew that I couldn't run from my past. No matter where I went or what I did, the cult would always be after me. But I also knew that I had the power to fight back, to protect myself and others from their dark influence. I stayed at the pizza place, but I was always on guard, always ready for the next attack. And I knew that, one day, I would have to face the cult head-on, and put an end to their reign of terror once and for all. As I continued to work at the pizza place, I tried to keep the memories of the cult and the old mansion at bay. But then, something strange began to happen. One day, while making a delivery, I found myself outside of a familiar-looking house. It was the old mansion where the cult had once held their rituals. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as I approached the front door. But when I knocked, I was surprised to see that the person who answered was none other than the old woman who had stabbed me. She looked different, younger, and seemed genuinely happy to see me. "I'm so glad you're back," she exclaimed. "We've been waiting for you." I was confused and didn't know what to make of it. The old woman invited me in, and as we talked, I learned that the cult had disbanded years ago. She claimed that they had seen the error of their ways and were now living peaceful lives. I was skeptical, but then I realized something else. The symbol on my arm, the one that had glowed when the cultist had tried to attack me, was now gone. It was as if it had never been there. Confused and unsure of what to believe, I left the mansion and went back to the pizza place. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like the world was shifting and changing around me. And then, I got a call from the police. They had arrested the owners of the pizza place for running a drug trafficking ring. I was shocked and didn't know what to do. But then, I received another call, this time from the old woman. She told me that she knew about the pizza place's illegal activities and had been watching me for some time. She offered me a deal: if I helped her take down the pizza place, she would help me confront the cult and put an end to their reign of terror. I was hesitant, but then I remembered what had happened at the mansion. Maybe the cult really had changed. Maybe I could trust the old woman. So, I agreed to her deal, and together, we took down the pizza place and the drug ring. But when we went to confront the cult, we found something that we never expected. It turned out that the cult had been a front for a secret government agency, one that had been experimenting with mind control and psychic abilities. The symbol on my arm, the one that had disappeared, had been a result of their experiments on me. I was stunned, and so was the old woman. We had been played, and now, we were in danger of being silenced by the agency. But then, something even more surprising happened. The old woman revealed that she was actually an agent of the agency, sent to infiltrate the cult and keep an eye on me. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The world had turned upside down, and I was caught in the middle of it all. As I look back on it now, I realize that everything that had happened was just a series of twists and turns, a maze that I had been lost in. And the truth is, I don't know if I ever really found my way out. After the shocking revelations about the cult and the government agency, I was left reeling. I didn't know who to trust or what to believe. The old woman who had once stabbed me was actually an agent, and the cult that I thought had been disbanded was actually a front for a sinister government organization. I was in over my head, and I knew it. But I also knew that I couldn't just sit back and let them control me. I had to find a way out. So, I decided to go underground. I quit my job at the pizza place and cut off all contact with the old woman and the agency. I spent my days researching and investigating, trying to uncover the truth behind the mind control experiments and the cult's involvement. It wasn't easy, but eventually, I stumbled upon a lead. I found out that the agency had a secret facility where they conducted their experiments. It was located deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. I knew I had to see it for myself, so I packed my bags and headed out to the facility. When I arrived, I saw that the place was heavily guarded, but I managed to sneak past the security and make my way inside. What I saw there still haunts me to this day. Rows and rows of people, all hooked up to machines and wires, their eyes vacant and their minds controlled. I realized then that I was lucky to have escaped the agency's grasp. But just as I was about to leave, I heard a familiar voice. It was the old woman from the cult, and she was begging for my help. "I need you to help me," she whispered. "They're going to kill me. Please, you're the only one who can save me." I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to leave her there, to let her suffer the fate she deserved. But another part of me felt a strange sense of obligation. After all, she had helped me when I was in trouble. So, I decided to help her. I snuck her out of the facility and took her to a safe place. But as soon as we were outside, she turned on me. "You fool," she sneered. "Did you really think I was on your side? I'm still working for the agency, and you just fell into my trap." I was stunned. I had been played once again. But just as I thought all was lost, something strange happened. The symbol on my arm, the one that had glowed and disappeared, suddenly appeared once again, glowing brighter than ever before. And with that glow came a sense of power. I realized that I had been given some sort of ability, something that the agency had been trying to control all along. With newfound confidence, I turned to face the old woman, and in a burst of energy, I sent her flying across the room. She hit the wall with a sickening thud and slumped to the ground. I knew then that I had to use my newfound power to put an end to the agency's experiments once and for all. And so, I went back to the facility, ready to take down the organization that had tried to control me. The battle was fierce, but in the end, I emerged victorious. The agency was disbanded, and the experiments were destroyed. I was free, and the symbol on my arm had disappeared once and for all. But even as I celebrated my victory, I knew that the memory of what had happened would stay with me forever. The horrors I had witnessed, the betrayals I had endured, they would always be a part of me. And though I had emerged from the darkness, I knew that the shadows would always linger, waiting to pull me back in. As I walked away from the facility, I knew that I had done the right thing. It wasn't easy, and it came at a great cost, but I had stopped the agency and put an end to their mind control experiments. I also knew that I couldn't go back to my old life. The horrors I had seen and the power I had gained had changed me forever. But instead of being afraid of that change, I embraced it. I started a new life, one where I used my abilities to help others. I became a vigilante, fighting against those who tried to control and manipulate people. And as I walked the dark streets at night, I knew that I was making a difference. But even though I was a hero to some, I was still haunted by my past. The memories of the cult and the agency would never fully go away. But I had learned to live with them, to use them as fuel for my fight against injustice. And so, I continued on, always vigilant, always ready to fight for what was right. And though the darkness still lurked in the corners of my mind, I knew that I was strong enough to face it, and that I would never be controlled again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to hit the like button and consider subscribing to our channel for more great content. Your support helps us continue to create and share valuable information with you. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.